want to again thank you for showing interest tonight in Bernheim, showing interest in the birds of the world. And you know, Bernheim and birds are inseparable. The forests and the birds rely on each other, and we rely on them as well. So tonight we've got, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little update on Bernheim activities from our Director of Conservation, Andrew Berry. And then I'm going to introduce Dr. Barney Schlinger, our ornithologist in residence. And from there, he's going to present on why birds dance, which ought to be really cool. And then, of course, we're going to give you a chance for questions and answers. But I might remind you that if you need clarifications or if you're thinking of questions as we go, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. And I think Alicia will be monitoring them. And if there's something we may introduce during the talk, but we'll take a lot of those questions after the presentation is over. So does that sound good to everybody? All right, thumbs up, I like it. Well, again, thank you very much for being here and welcome to all the bird clubs. We greatly appreciate all of your support. All you other bird enthusiasts, get involved with a club. They need you. We need you. We want everybody to be educated and enthusiastic about birds. So, right now, there's a lot of things moving into Bernheim finally. Dr. Schlinger, myself, Andrew Berry, our Director of Ornithology, our Director of Conservation, and our Forest Manager, Evan Patrick, went out yesterday morning and walked the potential route of the LG&E pipeline across our Cedar Grove area. And we identified 30 plus birds, mostly by Dr. Schlinger's ears, but we did get some really great looks at some of the early migrants. And so, we also found box turtles and salamanders and all these wonderful creatures that rely on forests that are intact and growing old. And so that's one of the reasons we continue to protect our land with such vigor. With that, I'd like to introduce Andrew Berry, our Director of Conservation. Andrew?
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here, and thank you all for joining us. I'm going to do a quick screen share. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. So I'll just talk about what's happening at Bernheim. Again, I'm Andrew Berry, Director of Conservation. And, there's so much that Bernheim has been doing throughout our history with birds. We've got a project, Birds of Bernheim, that goes all the way back to Burt Monroe and some of the early studies and investigations that he started with Natural History Society and going way back with the Beckham Bird Club and others. We do want to thank everybody who supports Birds of Bernheim, including the Kentucky Audubon Council, the Beckham Bird Club, our membership, our board of trustees, just people all over Kentucky and all over the world who've shown support for Bernheim and what we do for birds. Now at 16,140 acres, Bernheim really provides an incredible array of habitats for birds of all kinds. We've documented 229 species throughout our history. They come for our forests, they come for our prairies, our cedar glades, our streams, our wetlands. We try to maintain habitats and also to connect up with other protected natural areas to try to provide for these birds, which, as many of us know, are in serious decline. A study by Cornell Ornithological Lab has shown that birds, particularly songbirds, have declined by 30% over the last 5 decades. These are alarming statistics. And so Bernheim is not only trying to provide habitat, but we're also trying to do research to figure out how we can keep these birds around. Things like our tracking of songbirds with the MODIS Wildlife Tracking Project, an international collaboration with Birds Canada and Cornell to track songbirds on their migrations from Kentucky all the way down into Central and South America. You're also maybe familiar with our golden eagle tracking, where we've investigated a pair that used Bernheim in the winter, Harper and Athena, and tracked them back to Churchill, where now they are building a nest in a frozen tundra on the Hudson Bay lowlands. hopefully soon laying an egg and then fledging a chick and then making their way back to Bernheim again this winter, maybe with the chick with Athena. So, you know, it's just great to be here and to have all of your support. And I look forward to hearing what Dr. Schlinger has to say tonight about what makes birds dance. But finally, I want to mention something about our land protection and what we're doing to protect habitat for birds. Got a big boost this week when the USDA announced a $6.8 million grant that will go to protect land around Bernheim. And we're going to do that through conservation easements and working to put those funds directly in the pockets of landowners who do the right thing to protect forests, to protect wildlife, to protect corridors, and to provide much needed climate benefits at this time in our history. So thank you all. I hope to share more about that with you soon. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark and Dr. Schlinger. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And during question and answers, those will be directed at Dr. Schlinger, but also Andrew Barry will be on the line, so you can always direct some things towards him. So what I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Schlinger, who is a professor of integrative biology and physiology and a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at UCLA. He has also been an associate researcher at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama and is a Humboldt Award winner and visiting scientist at the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology in Germany. He's published over 175 scientifically reviewed papers. He has book chapters and in fact is working on a book of his own right now, mostly on birds and avian bird behavior. He's an avid bird watcher. He and I go back to graduate school together, watching birds, going out, in northeasterners, on the Boston coast, trying to spot seabirds, talking science and biology. So it's been a great relationship over all these years. He's had many fascinating studies of birds in the field, as well as laboratory research. And what you're going to hear about tonight is some of the behavioral aspects of his research, some of the hormonal and brain research as well. But I think you're in for a treat. And without further ado, Dr. Barney Schlinger.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks, Mark, and thank all of you for joining in tonight. And, it's always a great thrill for me to be able to talk to people who are part of bird clubs and such, because I started out as just a hardcore bird watcher, and my interest in birds grew into an interest in the science that is the basis of their behaviors. And so, but in my heart, I'm still a basic bird watcher. So, but, let's just get things going here. This talk is really going to be about these wonderful birds called manakins. They live in the Neotropics. They are extraordinarily beautiful birds, and many of them have extraordinary courtship displays that the males perform to attract females. So I'm going to spend about the first half of the talk introducing you to many of the mannequins and showing you videos of their dances, and including some ultra high speed video, some of the things that they do, something that we kind of pioneered going out in the field and doing this. And so I hope you really enjoy this, and we're just going to kick it off right now. I hope you're ready, because here goes. So I hope you can hear this. So these are two different groups of mannequins and some of the dancing that they do. Many of the manakins and other bird species engage in these lek mating systems where many of the birds can you hear me? Okay, because I think somebody may have their sound on. It would be great if you could all mute yourselves because I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. But anyway, so many birds engage in this lek mating system where males gather together in groups and try to attract females. And so we want to learn a little bit about what a lek mating system is. These are not manakins, obviously. These are prairie chickens, and there's a display court that they use. The males compete for the females. The females are very choosy, and they only choose certain males that dance for them that they will choose to mate with. And it's not all that different from humans. For example, all right, so the manakins are found all throughout the Neotropics, from the central Mexico all the way down to northern Argentina. They are an extraordinary group of birds. They're largely frugivorous, and because fruit is available year-round, it can affect the behavior that they can express. This is a female manakin here with a berry in her mouth. The berries in the tropics, small fruits like this, are really abundant year-round and come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors. But by virtue of having such a plentiful food supply, the parents can separate their basic behaviors. So the females can lay the eggs, build the nest, lay the eggs, and take care of the young all by themselves. They don't need the male to be around. So single parenting becomes possible. The food also has high energy supply, so that can actually serve to provide the energy for males to display. If the male doesn't have to take care of helping to feed the female or feed the young, the males are free to go off and try to reproduce with as many females as possible. And they do that. Moreover, the berries contain lots of pigments that can be used to provide coloration for the birds. So I want to spend a little bit of time just introducing you to some manakins and talk a little bit about how they evolved. They are subossine birds. They are closely related to our flycatchers, the tyrant flycatchers. You know many of them around here: the eastern kingbird, the eastern wood pewee, the eastern phoebe. Those are all members of the flycatcher group, as most of you know. And the manakins are quite closely related to them. But clearly they're very different. Most of the flycatchers that you know of are pretty bland in their coloration, and the manakins are obviously quite brilliant. So how did that develop? So we want to think about this from an evolutionary perspective, and you'll see how their behavior has evolved over the years, starting from these New World flycatchers, the tyrant flycatchers. With the one example here is the ochre-bellied flycatcher, which is a tropical flycatcher that is actually about the same size as many of the manakins. So this is the ochre-bellied flycatcher. That's his display. He shakes a wing and he makes a little squeaky sound, and that's pretty much it. So these flycatchers, as their name indicates, are largely insectivores, though they do feed on some fruit. But these ochre-bellied flycatchers do help the female at the nest, and they have a minimal kind of courtship display. Some of the earliest evolved manakins are called Neopelma, the tyrant manakins, because they in fact look a lot like little flycatchers. They just have a little bit more color on their crests on the top of their heads, and their courtship displays are a little bit more elaborate. So I hope so they do gather together in what are called exploded leks, but here's a tyrant manakin doing its display. It's a little bit more complex, and if you listen carefully, you'll hear some of the sounds they make. Hear that? So that's the saffron-crested tyrant manakin of Brazil. It's a little bit more complex. Then there's some kind of outlier Manakin species like this one, the Xenopipo, that are pretty drab species. This one's called the black Manakin. When it was first described, they said this somewhat dumpy and atypical Manakin has a male display that is distinctly unspectacular and undemonstrative by Pipridae standards. Pipridae are the Manakins, consisting slowly of calls and chases amongst rival males with no special display grounds. Well, so this is the display of a black Manakin. If you listen carefully, you can hear a little click at the top. So it looks pretty unspectacular, right? But if you use a ultra high speed camera and you film a black Manakin doing just that courtship display, and this is being filmed at up to 1,000 frames per second, this is actually what he's doing. You cannot see that. So let me, let's just look at this one more time. All you see is him jumping. Maybe it gets a little blurry at the top. The little snapping sound. But this is what he's doing. It is so fast, you can't see it with the naked eye. But presumably, the female Manakin does. Otherwise, why would he do it? Female Manakins, we think, have exceptionally fast visual processing, much, much faster than our visual processing. So pay attention to that. That'll come back a little later in this talk. And this was filmed in French Guiana by a scientist who had done their work originally in my lab and then have gone off and is now at the University of Mississippi. Her name is Lainey Day. So there's another group of Manakins, these Chiroxiphia. You saw the dancing group, the line dancing of these birds earlier. They tend to do these performances as in groups. This one is called the blue Manakin. It's from South America, Brazil. But some of you may be familiar with either the long-tailed Manakin, this one at the top, or the lance-tailed. A lot of people who go to Costa Rica often see long-tailed Manakins, and they do a collective display where more than one male gather together. These long-tailed Manakins, two of them will gather. And you hear that Toledo call. They each participate. Two males together participate. One of them is the alpha male, and he will copulate with that female who just came in. And the beta male will wait until that alpha male disappears, and he will assume the alpha position. So there's a lot of diversity in this group of birds in terms of how they court females. And but this is the group that I'm most interested in. It's the Manicus Manakins. It consists of the white bearded Manakin of South America, the white collared Manakin, which is also found in Costa Rica, the orange collared Manakin in Western Panama, and the bird, the golden collared, which is a bird that I've been working on in Panama for about 25 years. We're very, very interested in all of the different elements that contribute to their courtship display. Why do they do it? Why do females select certain males? How do they make some of the remarkable acrobatics that they perform? And that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of this presentation. So these are all the males, and I'll show you a little later on that females are just a dull green color, as are juvenile males. So keep that in mind. Now, the courtship display of this Manakin involves him clearing an arena in the forest floor. It's about 3 feet wide by maybe 2 feet, 3 feet long by 2 feet wide. It's always surrounded by some small saplings, and the male jumps, not flies, between these saplings, and in the middle of his jumps makes these incredibly loud snapping sounds. It sounds like your finger snapping, but it's louder. And bear in mind, he weighs 18 grams. I weigh a lot more than 18 grams, and he can make a louder snap than I can. And but at the same time, this whole group of birds, they're called bearded Manakins, and they hold out the feathers under their chins. Whoops! They hold out the feathers under their chins like a dewlap of a lizard, and so that's why you'll see that's part of their display. But this is this golden collar Manakin courtship display in the forest. So he's jumping between those saplings, making that loud snapping sound. And if you listen in the background, you can hear what sounds like a hear that in the background? Those are called roll snaps. They also make that weird little duck quack sound. And that duck quack sound is made when the male jumps to the ground and does a backflip with a half twist and then jumps back up to the perch. So why do these birds do this? And how do they make this loud snapping sound? So we know how they make the loud snapping sound now. And one of the ways that we've understood that is by filming these birds again at this ultra high speed. This is up to 2,000 frames per second. And in this case, it's synced with the audio. So I know that this is a little bit hard to see, but what this is a bird in a cage, actually. It's a male. He's facing you. So I hope you can see that. He looks really dark on his breast here. But here's his wings being raised up over his back. It's a little hard to see his head, but each of these frames is a half a millisecond. So it's 1/2000th of a second. And this line here that you can see is actually the acoustic signature. It's the sound. And you can't hear anything now. There's no sound, but you can see that this is the point where the snapping has taken place, right here. And what you can see is that as the bird lifts his wings, he lifts his wings, and just at the moment that he throws his wrists together over his back is when the snapping sound takes place. So these birds throw their wings over their backs and they hit their wrists together so hard and so fast that they make that loud snapping sound. That roll snap that you heard is them throwing their wrists together very, very rapidly, very hard over their backs. That's how they do this. Why would these birds make this sound this way? Why don't they just vocalize like every other bird vocalizes and sing a song? It's a very good question, but it's a remarkable behavior. It's fast, it's incredibly accurate, and perfectly timed. So they're doing all of this perfectly timed jumping from stem to stem, this wing snapping, this raising their beard up, all of this. It's very, very extraordinary and beautifully done. It's a terrific choreography of a dance. So they have many kinds of adaptations that allow them to make these powerful sounds and to perform these displays. One of which is if you look at the wing bones of the bird. So like your arm, you have a radius bone, which is kind of rounded, and it's very much like this bird here, the RCM. This is a red-capped Manakin. It doesn't make snapping sounds, it has this long radius. It's rounded throughout, and the heads of the radius, both the distal and medial ends, are rather small. This golden collared manakin and this other white collared manakin, both of which produce these loud snapping sounds, have these incredibly flattened radius bones with these very enlarged ends. So they make their snapping sounds by having adapted this enlarged, flattened radius, which in some respects is quite remarkable, because you would think that, gee, birds fly, they need to have their wings adapted perfectly for flight. You would think they wouldn't want to muck with the perfection of their wings that allows them to fly, but these birds do. So they've modified the radius in order to make this loud snapping sound. So the snapping must be really important to them. They also have incredible muscle. So the muscles that can allow them to throw their wings together so rapidly, and I'll show you a little bit more about this in a minute, have some of the fastest contraction rates of any vertebrate limb muscle that's been discovered. We know that, like, rattlesnakes have a very rapid twitching of their tail to allow them to rattle, but these birds have an incredibly rapid contraction rate of the muscle that lifts the wing in order to have them collide to produce this powerful sound. So again, this muscle that does that is this muscle that's in the back of the bird it doesn't matter what it's called, but it, the interesting thing about it is that, that when you buy a turkey or a chicken, there's almost no muscle at all on the back of the bird. It's all in the ventral part, because all of the flight muscles that a bird has is on their ventral surface. The muscle that lifts the bird's wing is actually on its breast, and it sends a tendon over a pulley system over to attach onto the top of the arm bone that lifts the wing when it contracts. So birds have no muscles on their back, almost none. It's all underneath their body, and that gives them the aerodynamic that's needed to be able to fly. But this bird has an enlarged muscle on its back, which is quite unusual. They also have these very enlarged gluteal muscles, which allow them to do these jumping displays that they have. In fact, this guy Percy Lowe in 1943, he wrote a paper describing the muscles of the manakin, and he described their gluteal muscles as looking like the naked buttocks of a newborn baby, which is something that I've never been able to write in one of my papers. But he could do that back in 1943. But it's true, they have these very enlarged muscles. So the manakins are quite special in that way. So hormones, we know, control these courtship displays. And this is just showing you kind of the seasonality of these birds in Panama. And so what you can see here is that there's a lengthy courtship season that lasts about 6 months, starts in about mid-January and lasts until June. It can extend into July. That period of time corresponds largely with the dry season in Panama. Now, the dry season in Panama is kind of like the rainy season here in Tennessee. It still rains, but it rains an enormous amount in the rainy season. So it's only during this period, when the dry season, when the males grow their testes, they secrete testosterone, and every single day, these males are at their little courtship arenas performing these courtship displays, hoping to attract females. It's a lek, because what happens is that you'll have anywhere from 3 to 20 males that will be in an area of forest from a half an acre up to maybe a hectare, where they gather, and each male has his own little courtship arena, and where he displays. And when a female comes into the lek, all the males will go down to their courtship arenas and start displaying hoping to attract that female. And she will traipse around, checking out individual males until she picks the male who has the display that she likes. And I'll show you some data about that in a minute. But how do we know that hormones actually control the male Manakin courtship display? Well, we've studied this, not in the field. We've done many of our studies on wild birds in the field. But I want to just show you that this is an adult female on the right. The male is on the left. But the juvenile males look exactly like the females in the wild. So when we see a green bird, we don't know if it's a male or a female, a juvenile male or a female. So we inherited a large aviary in the middle of the jungle that was designed initially to hold parrots that were going to be housed there and then released into the wild as a part of a conservation effort to reestablish parrots. And it wasn't being used, and they allowed us to adapt it to make it a aviary that was basically a Manakin lek. And so here's what we inherited. And this is one of my postdocs, Matt Fuchsjaeger, who did a lot of work here. And we trucked in some dirt. We planted some native flora of the kind that the Manakins like to use to make their courtship displays. And you can see 1 year later, everything grew. And I show this mostly to show to Mark, because I'm a terrible horticulturalist, except in the tropics, where I'm a terrific horticulturalist. So there you go, Mark. I can actually grow things. But what we did is we released males, these green birds, males, juvenile males or females, into this aviary. And we treated some of them with testosterone or not to see what they would do. And this is just showing you these jump snap displays. So, and we genetically sexed the green birds. So we could use the genome to just tell us whether the green bird was a female or a juvenile male. So here's a female that was given an implant that had nothing in it. And you can see they don't perform any of these jump snap displays. And if you give them testosterone, they still pretty much don't do any courtship displays. But the juvenile males could do it, even though they had basal levels of testosterone, just like the females. But if you gave them some extra testosterone, they could perform a lot of these jump snap displays. So we recorded a lot of these different behaviors in these aviaries. Just want to show you one other example. The males keep their courtship arenas clear of debris. It's quite remarkable. When you go in the forest, you can, if you don't see a male Manakin, you actually look to the ground and you find out where there's a little cleared spot in the arena. I mean, in the forest. You can imagine, here's a rainforest. It rains all the time. The trees drop their leaves. They drop sticks. They drop, there are ants bringing leaves through. There's also, seedlings are trying to grow. These little birds can keep their courtship arenas completely cleared, and they can do it for year after year after year after year. So it's a remarkable kind of gardening behavior, it's called. And you can see here that females, even with testosterone, never showed any gardening behavior in this aviary. We threw leaves all over the place, and they never picked up a leaf. The males without testosterone also had no interest in leaves in this courtship arena. But you give them testosterone, and boy, they clean. So, so this kind of gardening behavior is a totally testosterone dependent behavior. It is completely sexually dimorphic. And it's a very interesting to think about the brains and how hormones do this and what motivates males to do it and what prevents females from being motivated to do this. I just want to point out that I do a lot of cleaning in my house, but my wife does some too. So it's more fair. So anyway, so just quickly, so hormones control behavior, but how do hormones do this? I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but just keep in mind that hormones are secreted into the bloodstream. They travel all over the body. And if there's a tissue that has a receptor for that hormone, then the hormone can bind to it and it can act on that, the cells of that tissue. And it's like a lock and key kind of principle. So testosterone is an androgen, and it can bind to an androgen receptor if a cell or tissue has it, and it can then affect changes in that tissue. And we think about this all the time with testosterone in muscle, in humans, that people like to take steroids to help build their muscles, and it's a terrible idea of things to do. But what about the manakins? Well, this is the roll snap. That entire sequence took 300 milliseconds, a third of a second. It's an incredibly fast behavior. I'm going to just play it again. So it's when you hear it, normal speed, it's so he's throwing his wings over his back as fast as a hummingbird flies. And he's throwing his wrists together. So how and why do they do it? And what do hormones have to do with this? Well, this is just showing you this roll snap. Again, this entire line along the bottom is 1 full second. There are 12 of these individual snaps in this particular roll snap. Each of these bars is a snap. And you can measure this. So each of these snaps is separated by about 20 milliseconds. It's an incredibly fast behavior. So, and we know now that androgens are especially important for this, because there's a compound, a drug called Casodex, which only blocks androgen receptors in the periphery. So it only acts on things like muscle. It doesn't go into the brain or the spinal cord and act on androgen receptors there. So again, what we're looking at along this bottom axis is this snap interval. So this is showing you that in most cases, manakins can do up to 19 of these snaps in a row. One male in particular was able to do 23 individual snaps. And the snaps, the time difference between each snap, the boom, boom, was 20 milliseconds, an incredibly fast time. And you can see here that it's about 20 milliseconds all the way through. These bars are showing you the variance around this, and you can see that there's very little variance. So they are really perfectly producing this behavior, and they can do it for up to 23 times in a row. And that's from birds that were given an implant that contained nothing. But if you give them an implant that contains this drug called Casodex that blocks androgen receptors in their muscles, then the males can only do 7 or 8 of these snaps in a row, and they do it more slowly, and there's much more variability. Now, you may say 2 milliseconds is not that much, but for a Manakin, it's a lot. And so the fine motor control of this behavior is completely dependent upon androgens acting on their muscles. So we can extrapolate from some of these findings and some other work that we've done. And we now know that androgen receptors in the golden collared manakins are expressed at some of the highest levels of any bird species examined. And so what that means is that all of the males of various species, including humans, an adult human and an adult male manakin, we make about the exact same amount of testosterone in our testes that we secrete into the bloodstream. And all of these bird species have very similar levels. They activate reproduction and testicular function. But what makes the manakins different, the dancing birds different from the non-dancing birds, is that the dancing birds have a lot more androgen receptors in their muscles than the non-dancing birds. And the birds that show a little bit of dancing have a little bit of androgen receptor in their muscles. So we can think about this in terms of human athletes, that maybe one of the things that makes some of the human athletes better athletes is not the amount of testosterone in their blood, it's the amount of the androgen receptor they have in their muscles that they inherited from their parents. So it's really an amazing way that nature works to control these complex kinds of courtship displays is by making their tissues more sensitive to the testosterone that they secrete. So now I wanted to get back to this keeping the court clear, because and I want to show you a video. It's a kind of a long video, but I hope you'll watch it. I want you to pay attention to the fact that the males, again, only weigh about 18 grams, which is about the weight of 3/4. But we wanted to know how much weight can they actually remove from their arena. So we did an experiment on wild birds where we took artificial leaves and we put them into the middle of their courtship arenas, and we added weight to the bottoms of their leaves. So the original little leaf, we went to an artificial plant store and bought plants that had leaves. We put little weights on the bottom, and it turned out the best weights to stick to the bottom were like little coins. So we increased the weight to see how much weight these birds could actually move. And it turns out that they can easily remove leaves that weighed twice their body weight. And they can pick them up and fly off with them. But I wanted to just show you one little example of kind of just sit back and watch. Here's a male manakin at his courtship arena. And you'll see that here's the fake leaf right here in the middle of his arena. And I'm going to start this, and you'll see that what makes this particular video interesting is that he has a visitor that comes to his courtship arena. It's an agouti, which is a large forest rodent. But you see, here's our male. He's looking at the agouti, he's looking at his leaf, and he's very concerned about both. You hear those little sounds, little sounds. It's a stress call that he makes. He wants to move that leaf. But maybe he's just a little shy. He doesn't like to move leaves when agoutis are watching. Okay, so now the agouti's gone. Now he can focus his attention on that leaf. Just wait. There you go. So he can clean a leaf off of his arena. That, I don't know if you saw quickly, there were some coins underneath that leaf. That was a 12-gram leaf that he was able to pick up and toss off of his court. So they're pretty strong. Again, that leaf was bigger in diameter than he was. It weighed almost half his, 2/3 of his weight, and he was able to pick it up and fly off with no problem, in his beak. So they're tough little birds. So as I've just talked about, manakins like the golden collared have specialized bones. They've got specialized muscles. They have incredible athletic ability. They perform these courtship displays every day. They perform hundreds of them per day in the morning and in the evening. So they have this high performance athletic ability. And the question becomes why? Why do birds do dances like this? Why do they evolve these physical characteristics? Is it indeed because of female choice? And you know, if the females are choosing them, what are the females looking at? And it's our belief, in fact, that females are looking at the neural and muscular capability of these males. The males that have the greatest neural coordination and muscular capability are the ones that the females are mating with, and the males can show off their capability by doing these dances with the jumps and the wing snaps, and that are just perfectly done, just like a gymnast doing floor exercise. And we know this because we've done a lot of this high-speed video, up to 1,000 frames per second on wild males. And we've seen copulations that have taken place. And we can then go back and we can take measures of all the different elements of their courtship displays and relate that to copulations. And so, for example, one of the things that they do is when the male flies from one perch to the other, he quickly turns in midair, lifts his beard up, or those feathers under his beak, and he shows them to the female. And that whole little move at the end can take anywhere from 100 to 150 milliseconds. It's very fast. Well, what you can see here is that we're looking at the number of copulations that males get on this side. They don't get very many, but the males that are slower, that take 150 milliseconds, they get almost zero copulations. And the males that do it faster get more copulations. So this is a significant relationship showing you that females seem to be able to distinguish the difference in tens of milliseconds watching these males perform. You can't do that. You can discern maybe something about 3 times that fast or 3 times slower than that. They're just very, very, very fast visual processing speed. But it also turns out that it's not just the speed, it's how many displays they do, how many roll snaps. You can see here there's a positive correlation between the number of copulations and the number of displays that they actually perform per day, the number of calls that they produce, the number of wing snaps that they make, the number of roll snaps that they performed. All of those are correlated, but there's an inverse correlation between the speed that they get the beard up, and I already showed you that, or the amount of time that they actually spend on the perch. So the males that jump more quickly and don't hold on to the perch for very long get more copulations. So all of that points to this really kind of remarkable neuromuscular capability, and the females seem to be able to assess differences between individual males in selecting them. So we also know that males get better with practice. So we think that the females are actually also preferring older males. And I don't just say that because I've got a gray hair and a beard, but we do think that the females do assess males to some degree because they get better with age. And they get better with their neural processing. They get better with the biomechanics of the elements of their display. The hormonal regulation has specializations that enable this to occur, and the energetics that fuels this seems to improve with time as well. So with that, I'm going to conclude. I just want to thank a number of people. So again, I've done all of this work on the golden collared manakin, but there's a whole collection of scientists from South and Central and North America and even Europe who contributed some of the videos that I showed you. their names are listed here. Several of these are students of mine who've gone off and done their own work. Of course, there were clips from Saturday Night Fever and from some other individuals as well. So I owe them thanks for putting some of this together. But with that, I hope you have gained some appreciation about dancing in birds and about manakins in general. And again, we can stand to learn a lot from studies of birds in ways that we wouldn't otherwise really expect to understand. And we can gain appreciation for their remarkable neural processing, the ways their brains work, but also other aspects of their biology. And I hope that's come across in this talk today. So with that, I'll conclude and thank you all very much for listening. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you, Dr. Schlinger. That's remarkable. I think I'll look at it every courtship a little bit differently from now on. And I'll use that old cliche. Maybe it's not so bad to be called a bird brain, right? If they're so well, at doing, visualizing and controlling muscles and everything else. That's really fabulous. So we'd like to open it up to questions. There was one on the chat, Dr. Schlinger, that said, are there invertebrate species with faster muscular contractions?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I usually don't bring up invertebrates because yeah, the snapping shrimp, there are mantises, there are some of the tongue movements of actually that's a vertebrate, but of some of the frogs. There are other very fast mussels that exceed that in the Manakin. So yeah.
Another question just came across was, are manakins ever found in the United States? Do they ever make their way, maybe blow-ins to South Florida or South Texas or?
No, they really don't. They're the farthest north is in some of the tropical forests. I don't know exactly, but I think you have to go at least a couple of 100 miles south of the Texas border. They're not very good flyers. So they stay in the forest, they fly to fruiting trees and back to their courtship arenas. So long distance migration is just not part of their repertoire.
Great, great. Anyone else have some questions? We'll open it up. We'll unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, and we'll, Bruce and Laura.
I'm having trouble picturing the wing snap and understanding why it's not muted by the padding of the feathers.
Yeah. So the skin and the feathering right at the point where the wings strike each other are quite thin, and but it's really a bit hard to understand. One of the ways that we know it's the bones, I didn't mention this, but one of the other features of the bones is that many bird bones are hollow. These are solid, and they're only solid in these. The radius is solid, not 100% solid, but about 90% solid. And in the other birds, it's 90% hollow. But we did all sorts of modeling, and we actually worked with an aeroacoustic engineer who could model the sound production by also, what were all the various different ways that they might be able to produce the sound. Was it a whip crack of the feathers, exceeding the speed of sound? Or was it some other kind of joint movement that might, have produced this? And all of the mathematical modeling pointed directly to the bones themselves vibrating at that frequency that was the snap.
Great. Anyone else? Well, I'll tell you what, we're running a little bit short on time. So I would like to have Alicia Feldman from our advancements office tell you about some of the upcoming activities. And then if people need to leave, we'll allow that. If you want to stay on for another few minutes and ask questions of Andrew Barry, our conservation director, or Dr. Schlinger, we'll stay on for a couple of minutes to make sure we've gotten everybody's questions. Alicia.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Dr. Schlinger, for that riveting presentation. It was so intriguing to me. So I wanted to thank Beck and Bird Club and Kentucky Audubon Society, as Mark mentioned before, for supporting our bird avian research, specifically MODIS, as well as some of our education programs that we do centered around birding. So thank you guys once again. I know that there's many of you on this presentation, so thank you very much for your support. We couldn't do what we do without you. I did want to give you an update on some exciting openings and some other campaigns that we have going on. So on starting May 12th is our Kentucky Gives Day through the Central Community Foundation. We are trying to raise $20,000. We received a very generous matching challenge from Mr. Bernheim's great-grandson. So we are hoping on May 12th we can get to our $20,000 goal, and you guys can join us on that. And then right after that, we are going into our spring annual campaign, which is Soar with Bernheim. So very appropriate for our presentation today, supporting a lot of our sustainability and our avian research and Bernheim in general, connecting people with nature. So please be sure to join and support that campaign. And then I'm sure some of you have seen that Bernheim is currently working on our Playco system. So our first phase of our 10-acre natural playground will be opening soon, and the opening to the public will be May 22nd. So we hope to see you there and experience our wonderful Playco system. And then shortly after that, in June 12th, we will be opening our Jason Fan Spirit Nest. So kind of continuing in on our bird topic, Jason Fan will be creating a human-sized bird's nest that he calls a spirit nest. And there'll be some education tied to that, as well as a lot of great experiences for you guys to come out and enjoy Jason Fan as well as Playco system. So please join us for that opening on May 22nd and June 12th. And we hope to see you all there. As Mark said, if anyone wants to stay on for questions for either Andrew or Dr. Schlinger, we'll hang on, or you can go ahead and type those questions onto that chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure to be with you tonight. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we look forward to seeing you all out live again at Bernheim as things become a little more reasonable, and come out and connect with nature, enjoy yourselves, and see all the activities we have going. So again, thank you for the evening. Dr. Schlinger or Andrew Barry, if you'd stay on for a few minutes, and we'll see if there are any additional questions. If you do have any, please speak up. Anyone? Garrett? You're gonna have to unmute.
Unmute myself. Thank you so much. That was just brilliant and beautiful. Are the manakins as threatened as so many of our songbirds are in their habitat?
Well, some of them are, yes. You know, there are the blue manakin, for example, which is many of them live in the Atlantic forest of Brazil, which is a very precious, wonderful forest. A good bit of that Atlantic forest has disappeared. Even in Panama, you know, there's a lot of American expatriates, you know, who go to Panama or have winter homes or buying property there, and they're buying property in some of the nicest areas where some of the manakins live. And of course, deforestation in Brazil affects several of them. There's the one in particular, oh God, I'm blanking on the name of it. I showed a picture of it early on. It's an extraordinarily beautiful manakin. It only lives in a very tiny little part of Brazil. It's gonna drive me crazy. But
It'll
anyway,
come to
it's
you.
an extraordinary, beautiful bird, and it only lives in this small area. And it is, you know, there may be only 500 pairs of these birds in its entire range. I'm gonna have to pull up my screen because I have to show you this bird. Hold on. It's called the Araripe. It's this one. Can you see this? This one with the white with the
Yeah,
red
right.
crest on the head. The Araripe Manakin is certainly threatened in its range. So, yeah, it's a problem.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I can't see everybody with the, there we go. Anyone else? All right. Well, in that case, once again, thank you, Dr. Schlinger. Thank everybody for watching tonight. We look forward to seeing you out at Bernheim. And thanks again for the support of all of our programs, from Golden Eagles to Motus and the Birds of the World. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.